Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're joined by Jacob Crane, a citizen of the Tsuut'ina Nation located in the province of Alberta, Canada. He is currently the executive director for the SLC Air Protectors, a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving the Indigenous people of the state of Utah. And he's the board treasurer for the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake. As a social entrepreneur, Jacob enjoys building startup companies that positively impact the Native communities. Like many, he wishes to see a more cautious tribal investment for future generations that also creates platforms to build a more robust Indigenous economy. In 2019, Jacob was the recipient of the Running Strong for American Indian Youth Billy Mills Dream Starter Entrepreneur Grant for his work with his media company, The Arrow's Journey, which uplifts the story of successful Indigenous youth. He's also a part of the Renewing Indigenous Economics cohort with the Hoover Institute at Stanford University this past summer. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited about this conversation, and just so everyone is aware, it's Indigenous Peoples Month, which is kind of why we chose the timing to have this conversation. And I want to start with the youth prayer run. Will you tell us a little bit about how the idea for this prayer run started and what made you want to do this program?
Yeah. So the Running as Medicine Indigenous Youth Prayer Run started, kind of the theme started behind COVID-19 because, we wanted to show the Indigenous community that we cared and that, everybody that we needed prayers, everybody needed prayers and healing during this time. So that was one of the reasons, one of the main driving forces why we did the prayer run. And also the previous year, our past executive director had put on a different run. I think it was called 10,000 Allies prayer run. But this year we wanted to, we felt that it was necessary for us to pray for everybody and have those prayers and healing, but also because, running has been such an integral part of Indigenous people. Before the horse, we were the first messengers. So we would, run miles and miles, and we'd be the first ones into the camp to basically, let everybody know that we had a good hunt or in times of war. So those were some of the key factors behind it.
And you mentioned that this was the first prayer run that was run, or did you say there was more than one that had happened before?
There was one that happened before previously. 2 years ago, our previous executive director had done something along those lines. But this year, because of COVID and the pandemic, we wanted to make sure that we themed the run around COVID-19.
And you mentioned that the idea of this originally was to kind of bring this prayer to the community. What were you willingly hoping to achieve with this? Like, what was your end goal with this entire run when you came up with the idea?
I guess the end goal was to ensure that people understood that we were praying for them, that Indigenous people are praying for the whole entire world. And so we understood that there were challenges, and we also wanted to bring about the awareness that, we are suffering right there with everybody. So that was kind of the end goal.
And tell us a little bit about the route that you decided to choose for this run as well. What is the significance of it, and how long was the run itself?
So we chose the route because Bears Ears National Monument and Warm Springs Park hold, sacred significance to the Utah tribes. And so we thought that, it would be good to start on sacred ground and end on sacred ground, but also to bring about that awareness of protection of sacred sites in Utah. And so the total distance that we ran, we brought in a team of 10 runners from across Indian country, and it was 353 miles, I believe. Yeah, it was a bit.
When you were choosing those runners, I guess, explain to me, someone who's never done this before, how that all works. Did your tribe come together and choose who was doing the run? How did someone get involved with this? And was it something that, okay, everyone's going to run 10 miles, we'll switch on, or how did the entire process work?
So our board is Indigenous led. And so the majority of our board of directors at SLC Air Protectors is Native American. And so they were the ones who kind of, told me, hey, we're going to have this run. We're going to pray for the communities. How do we go about, selecting the runners? And so I kind of reached out to my network, and I have a large following on Facebook and Instagram. So that's why I was kind of able to see who these individuals were that were living a balanced, healthy life. And so, and they were always running. Like there's individuals who just constant, that's just what they do. They just wake up in the morning, you run, towards the sun. And so I thought, well, this individual should be here. This individual is a strong advocate for the missing and murdered Indigenous women. This individual is really good into, representing their tribe or themselves in a good way. So that's kind of how we chose the 10 runners.
So I want to bring this in with COVID-19. You mentioned that you went the way of this run this year because of COVID-19. What other impacts have this pandemic actually had on the Native community, both in more rural areas and more urban areas as well?
It's affected us greatly, just like everybody else. We're right there with everyone, from our ceremonies changing to our social gatherings to where we're working. And, just a little history, I was working for my tribe in Canada during when the pandemic first hit, and I actually lost my contract due to COVID-19. And so I came back down, and that's where I met SLC Air Protectors. We worked something out, and I became the new executive director. And so that's just a typical story in the Native American community where people can't work from the office. They have to go work at their homes now. And so now you're starting to see an issue with internet being accessible. And so there's just been a lot, simple things like washing your hands. They're just on the reservation on the Navajo. I know they're in those rural areas, there just isn't the infrastructure for that. So that can kind of be a bit of an issue. There's just been so much, and people, small businesses, mom and pop shops on the side of the road, people selling their jewelry, they just can't do that anymore because of COVID-19. And so it's been really hard. I know with my tribe, our economic development team has taken quite a hit. So it's been pretty emotional to see, this kind of happen and, kind of play out. So like I said, our anxiety levels are a little bit high. I'm pretty sure everybody's mental health and anxiety levels are high just because of the pandemic and how you can, get COVID-19. And so our social gatherings are completely, I'm a longtime powwow dancer and singer, and I can't go to a powwow and dance. That's my way of practicing my well-being. I can't do that. And so I think every powwow between now and next year has been completely canceled. So it's greatly impacted us. And so as an urban native, again, my anxiety levels are high, and I feel like I've been working triple the times that I would have been if things were just regular. So
you mentioned not being able to gather with your family, your tribe. And the lack of potential internet as well. Have you guys looked to do virtual events at all? Has that been something that's been possible with your community? How do you guys keep connected when you can't actually physically be with one another?
So there's a lot of people that have been getting super creative and trying to do like online concerts or the social distance powwow, but it just doesn't have the same effect. But I do give shout outs to people who are doing that. My cousin Fawn Wood, she's been doing a lot of that. So people are getting very crafty. They're doing more panels online where individuals talk about health and wellness. I know Jordan Marie Daniels, she was one of our runners. She was kind of the face of the run actually, but she does a ton of stuff online for health and wellness where we just talk like this, and it's a class, and there's many people that are watching. So there's people that are doing it, and it's just getting crafty and figuring out how to do it. And yeah.
I also know that the Navajo Nation, like you mentioned, has been hit really hard with COVID-19. It's been in the news a lot. We've heard a lot about it, especially from a healthcare system. What do you want people to know who do not have an insight into what's going on about how this is greatly impacting them? And is there anything we can do to help you guys further?
Yeah, I would, I think something, just understanding, like read the articles, find out what's going on, and reach out to the Native American organizations. There's a lot of nonprofits, in Salt Lake City, Provo, all over. There's even healthcare clinics. I'm the chair of the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake. And so Maurice Smith is our executive director. Shout out Maurice Smith. But I would always say, give them a call, ask, how can we help you? There's other Native American clinics on the reservations as well. and in the urban centers, and just look them up on Google, and all it takes is a phone call.
And we'll put some of those resources for people too at the end, just so they can learn a little bit more. I want to switch from COVID-19 to something a little bit more fun to talk about.
Yes.
What is the connection between land and running for Indigenous people, and why is this connection so important?
Well, I think, how do I say this? I'm trying to say it in a way where you'll understand, but our audience will understand as well. So I kind of mentioned it. I kind of hit on it a little bit in the beginning, where running is such a, it's such a fundamental part of who we are as Indigenous people. We were the first, again, before the horse. This is hundreds of years ago, where we would communicate with each other. We'd send our runners out, and so that was a status in the tribe. Being a messenger was a status, and so we would travel far and wide to deliver messages that there's people coming, or the enemy is coming. The hunt was great. We're here to, that was the male situation back then. And nowadays we could just flip on a Zoom and start talking like right now. So, but the connection, running as medicine, running for our well-being as Native people, it teaches us to be resilient and keeps us connected to the land in which we live and the natural stewards of it. So being grounded to the land is something that every Indigenous person goes through at least once in their life, and protecting it for the future generations and understanding our part in its preservation and taking care of it is not only our job, but it's also our duty to the Creator.
And that you bring up protecting it. I know that there's Bears Ears here. There's lots of monuments in the state of Utah and across the US, obviously, that are very important to your tribe and your community. So I hope when people go to visit those places that they understand what they are for, and making sure that those places are protected. I know there's been a lot in the media about Bears Ears in the last couple of years. And it's a beautiful place to go. So if you ever get the opportunity to go there, I highly suggest it. I want to talk about this thing called Walk in Beauty also. Can you share with us the concepts of Walk in Beauty and the individual health and well-being, and how those are kind of connected together with this concept?
So walking in beauty is a sacred, it's more of a sacred ideology to many Native American tribes. It's a state of peace and harmony that an individual is gifted with when they are on the right path or are doing good deeds in life. And so if you break that down, you kind of understand, where I'm going with this. And it is connected to the health and well-being, because to walk in beauty, one must be living a balanced life. To accomplish this, we must be caring for our mind, our body, and then our spirit. And so that's kind of like living a balanced life. And so I know for my wife, she's Navajo, Dene, I should say Dene now, but they say Hojon. But again, I can't go too much into that just because it's hard to translate that over into English, and I'm not Navajo, and so I don't want to get into that conversation. But it's a very sacred term to walk in beauty. So balance, life, health and wellness, mind, body, and spirit, if that makes sense.
It does, yes. And I think it's very relevant, even outside of your community too, especially right now. I know that, like you mentioned at the beginning, the mental health of people right now is something so important, and we have to find ways to come together as a community and kind of check in on one another. So it resonates with me, especially working in healthcare. We're kind of exposed to everything right now. And your organization has been involved in a lot of initiatives around helping people out with food insecurity for Native communities, which is one of the social determinants of health, and other things that your community or your organization has been involved with. Can you describe a few of those projects that you've been working on to address food availability and the Native traditions as well?
Yes. So our projects aim to demonstrate kinship for Native American tribes in the state of Utah by aiding them in rebuilding their community gardens and helping create new spaces for individuals to start gardening as well. So that's kind of something that we pride ourselves on in SLC Air Protectors, is developing a kinship for Indigenous communities here in Utah. And so helping restore these traditional food systems will directly benefit the community as a whole. Meanwhile, reinforcing food sovereignty on the reservation. Food sovereignty versus food security. Food sovereignty is the, how do I say this, is the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecological sound and sustainable methods, in the right to define their own food and agricultural system. So food insecurity is more considered with like solving hunger, and with the protection and distribution of existing food systems. If any lesson came from the pandemic, it would be that we need to support our people's diets and garden initiatives. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And what do you do exactly for this part of your organization? What's your involvement with that? Or is there something about your organization that you love to do to help out your community?
So something that we do is every year, well, since I started, we've been rebuilding community gardens on tribal nations, specifically on tribal nations. So for instance, we went out to the Goshute Nation, the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute Nation. We worked with their chairman, Rubit Steele, and their administrator, Ozzy Escalante, and we rebuilt their community greenhouses. And so there were two of them that were just kind of sitting there idling. And so we kind of went in, fixed them up, and now they have their food system that has kind of been restored. And so I know they're planting traditional foods there for their people to help hopefully support that traditional diet as well. And so that was something that we did for during the summer. We also were supporting Utahns through a small $200 micro grant. So we gave out 10 of those. And so since the pandemic and April kind of like took off with the Navajo Nation, I think we were one of the first groups down there from Salt Lake City to bring food, food, produce, boxed care packages down to the Navajo Nation. So we've been, I've probably been down there about 40 times since April. I think in 1 week I went down 5 times. 1 week, 5 times.
That's a long trip, isn't it? It's like 6 or 7 hours from Salt Lake, right?
6 hours.
Yeah, that's a far drive. Well, I'm sure they greatly appreciate it. And it's great to hear too that your company is involved with creating these greenhouses of cultural food and giving people the opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about that. I want to talk about what Intermountain and the healthcare system can do. What are some things that we should consider and be aware of as we move forward with strategies around social determinants of health, particularly from your perspective for the Indigenous community? How can we help you? What can we be doing better to kind of make sure that you're getting access to the healthcare that your community needs?
I think just calling and opening up those conversations with the tribes in Utah, if they haven't happened, and if they have happened, just revisiting those conversations and creating spaces. What we're doing right now with me and you, being able to have a conversation around that, maybe taking on a few more students from BYU, Utah Valley University, Utah State, and U of U, and Salt Lake Community College, Provo College, and putting them in an internship program, or maybe developing a scholarship program for Native American kids, young people that are can definitely rise in the ranks, and creating employment opportunities as well, and reaching out to the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake and Sacred Circle. And I know there's Indigenous Health and Wellness Connections, IHOC. They're a new nonprofit organization. In reaching out to those individuals and the tribal leaders and asking, how can we help? And I think this will lead to breaking the cycles of intergenerational trauma and really supporting Native American people.
And someone mentioned in the comments that supporting organizations that are already existing is a great way to get involved, which is very true. Like you said, reaching out to those organizations that exist and having that conversation, starting this conversation. I didn't know about the Salt Lake Air Protectors before this conversation. So I learn something new every time I do a Facebook Live. Jacob, is there anything else you want to mention to us about your community or any hopes that you have for your organization moving forward?
I would just say that we're always looking for partnerships and relationships with organizations. So please don't be shy. Reach out to me. Our website's there, slcairprotectors.org. You can reach us on Facebook or Instagram. But, you know, the best way to get involved is just to send that first initial message, and we will get back to you. And, you know, we're always looking for that. And to support the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake, I sit on I'm the chair, well, I'm the treasurer there. And so I have a deep relationship with the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake. And I'm blessed. I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to do the work that I do. And, you know, I love supporting the Navajo Nation, you know, the tribes in Utah, the Goshutes, Paiutes, Utes, Northern Utes, Southern Utes, and Shoshones. So I'm always looking to help in any way I can. So thank you.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. And a few resources for people before we leave. Like Jacob mentioned, you can go to his website, his organization's website at slcairprotectors.org. As always, if you have any questions about COVID-19 or would like to see if you qualify for a COVID-19 test, you can go to intermountain.com/COVID testing. You'll be prompted to take a quick questionnaire to see if you qualify for a test, which will then allow you to schedule an appointment arrival time. We also have our emotional health relief hotline available 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That is a free service that anyone can call to get the support they need. That phone number is 833-442-2211. Like Jacob mentioned, we're also hiring numerous positions right now, and you can find out about openings at intermountain.jobs. There's lots of openings for the frontline caregivers and other people throughout our system. Jacob, again, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.